Hello, hello. Right, welcome to our first mini festive episode where we're going to squeeze a bunch of questions into hopefully 20 minutes, and we're going to deep dive into some of the seasonal moments of HR. So that could be the nativity panic, the Christmas plot twist, it could be the famous flu bug, but we're going to dig deep and find out what HR does in these crisis moments. Alison, we're going to kind of pick your 3 decades of experience and yeah, talk about the weird and wonderful things that you've seen. And hopefully, if you're listening today, it will be insightful and somewhat amusing if you can relate to some of the questions that we answer for you. So let's begin. So across your 3 decades, what have you witnessed? You've probably witnessed some true Christmas classics. What's the festive instant that you'll never forget?
I think starting with probably the biggest challenge, the hardest, not nice thing that I've ever dealt with was a client had a Christmas party. Everybody went to the Christmas party.
Yeah.
Alcohol was, of course, taken. Possibly some pills popped. We don't know. No idea about that. But they had the Christmas party. One of the line managers invited all of his team back to his apartment afterwards for further drinks after the actual Christmas party. And they all went back, which was sort of fine, but something that I would normally try to discourage.
Yeah.
The team all left. And then one of the female members of the team went back because she'd forgotten something. So instead of leaving her stood on the doorstep and going and getting whatever it was that she had forgotten, I can't quite remember what it was now. I think it was her coat, which was a bit strange. Anyway, he invited her in. So, of course, needless to say, one thing led to another, and they ended up in a very compromising position.
Yeah.
And went a bit further than just basic sort of a kiss and a cuddle. They ended up in bed spooning, although they did say that nothing more than that actually happened. She eventually went home at very early hours of the morning. The next morning, of course, sober face of reality and with her boyfriend there, she then decided that that was sexual harassment and reported it as sexual harassment and raised a sexual harassment grievance, which we then had to deal with. It was a very difficult situation on both sides and should never have happened. A line manager should never do that. It's a position of power. So
Yeah.
from a claim point of view, you're on a bit of a hiding to nothing before you ever start, despite the fact that this was after the formal party had finished. There's still a fine line around, is it still work related? This was her boss, and so on and so forth. So setting very clear boundaries around the around what is and isn't the staff party is one thing. Line managers need to remain line managers and responsible at that time throughout the party and afterwards. Also, just irrespective of the risk of something like sexual harassment, they might be having to discipline somebody 2 days later. And if they've acted inappropriately or been really drunk, what does that person think of them when they're then trying to have a serious conversation with them a couple of days later? That was a really nasty one. Unfortunately, I haven't had too many of those in my life, but sexual harassment, unfortunately, the Christmas party is a pretty common one. He touched my bum on the dance floor was another one that I had to deal with a couple of years ago, which was, at the end of the day, we did sort it out and we set some parameters and it was acceptable outcome to both parties. But once again, very difficult and not nice to have to deal with.
No, and like you said, line managers, you're sort of never off duty, and your credibility is always going to be put under a lens if you're kind of mucking in with the troops on things you shouldn't particularly be doing. So yeah, that probably is a bit of a Christmas classic. Have you ever had to manage the morning after the Christmas party where someone's had no idea, what they've done, that real embarrassing moment? I don't know whether anything springs to mind, but the beer fear. The beer fear comes into effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people do seem to have this ability not to be able to remember what they did the night before when they've had a few drinks. And of course, that leaves them open to a huge amount of teasing the next day, where somebody tries to convince them that actually they were dancing naked on a table or something like that. And I have seen in years past that type of teasing go on. And of course, if the whole team gets behind it, then it does become the gosh, did I really? Oh, crikey. And that individual might begin to believe it. And of course, once again, one hopes we're a little bit more sensitive to things in this day and age, but you have to watch that that doesn't actually tip over into not being a laugh, but being bullying. And again, a very fine line. So I think, people, trying to be respectful, trying to be kind, and thinking about how they would feel in that situation is pretty important.
Yeah. I think there's always been those situations where that's happened, and then you see the joke potentially being carried on too long. So even when there's the next social, it might be the summer party, or the next corporate do, but that kind of reoccur, and it's some people just want to kind of try and draw a line under it, and it's not
a couple of minutes of teasing, fine, but like I said, when it goes on all day or all week or carries on and gets brought up every year, then that really isn't very fair, is it?
No. So what's the funniest or most inappropriate Secret Santa gift that you've ever seen land on an employee's desk? I don't know whether you've had any funny ones. I personally have seen a fair few funny ones land, but have you ever had that before?
Yes. I think for the most part, actually, I've been pretty lucky. I've never actually had any that I would think were totally inappropriate. I've had some that I thought, do you really know me? Where you're giving it, where it's not inappropriate particularly, it's just like, really, that's going straight in the next Christmas jumble sale or whatever. But I know you said you'd had one that
I had one where you have a member of the team who's got a great kind of sense of humor, and gave a mug to their Secret Santa, and it was particularly highlighting one of their appearances around being bold, unfortunately. And it kind of it's all fun and games, isn't it, when you open it on the shop floor and everyone thinks it's hilarious and funny, but actually probably when you look a bit deeper than that, and everyone goes back to their their desks or their office, some people, whether it's male or female, and whether it's poking fun at someone's personal appearance or something that they might be really self-conscious of, it sometimes just doesn't land the way you intended it, even if it's a real laugh and a joke and harmless. I guess you just don't know if that is really bothering that person. So I think boundaries have changed, over time on what's acceptable. And I'm sure back in the day there was sexual innuendos and all sorts of things being happening at Secret Santas and stuff. So it's just probably best to either put some boundaries in place, or maybe just avoid doing a Secret Santa.
I guess not quite a Secret Santa, but I did actually have to tell a female team to take down the Chippendales calendar, which was the equivalent of the Pirelli calendar that you once saw years ago up in usually garages. In the tyre centres, actually. Garages. That seemed to be the most commonplace years ago, not now. But I did actually have to say to them, that really isn't acceptable. And how would you feel if the guys were doing this, And it was like, it's only a bit of a laugh. And it is, but it's not acceptable in the workplace. So that was more of a New Year than a Christmas one. But yeah,
it's funny. It's funny trying to kind of rein people in. So the next question is around sort of the bug, in terms of the famous flu, or seeing a team kind of come down miraculously with the same thing. And it could be completely genuine or not. But I don't know whether you've ever had it where you've had a whole team go down with something right at a critical moment at Christmas time, or you've kind of managed to navigate the sickness and absence stuff quite well over the festive period.
Usually managed to navigate it reasonably well. Of course, we all remember COVID, and that was an absolute nightmare for everybody on just so many different levels. And that was the weirdest of Christmases in 2020. I think generally, sorry, it's I haven't really had whole teams go down with things. I do think it's a good idea to think about the morning after the night before. So either make it very clear to people that they are expected to be in work, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and at their normal start time. Or if it's possible, perhaps just accept as a business that it's quite a nice gesture of goodwill to say, we'll do a later start.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'd start at, if it's an office environment, we'll start at 10:30.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to come in, you have to put the day as holiday. And just accept that it's quite, like I say, it's quite a good gesture of goodwill. I think also thinking about, you know, people planning holidays in advance. That's one thing. I mean, my rule of thumb is, you know, try to get people to split their holiday up evenly over the year, but then to reserve a couple of days for December when they might want to go Christmas shopping, or they might want to do the nativity play, because that saves them sneaking off, or the grumble around they work from home. So I know that they were working from home, but they went off to the nativity play. They didn't book that as time off. And things like that. Now, we all accept if you work from home, there's a bit of flexibility. You might work on late that night or whatever. People in the office might not get the same options. So in terms of goodwill and understanding, it is worth thinking about those sort of things. And then talking to the team. I must admit, actually, for a long time, I was single and didn't have children, which makes me sound terribly sad, doesn't it? And I worked in hospitality. So actually, the priority for giving holiday over the festive period of Christmas and New Year usually went to people who didn't have children and or a partner. And to some extent, back in the day, you know, just used to suck it up and accept it. But I do remember somebody saying, yes, but I still have a family. I might be single and not have children, but I still have a family. So being cognizant to that is also important, and talking to people about what priorities are, particularly if you are in a 24/7 business or a business where you require call outs and things like that, that there isn't an unconscious bias against people who don't have children or don't have a partner. So it's just worth considering that. And it's really around just moral fairness, really, to some extent.
Yeah, and I think your point around saving 1 or 2 days, you know, even if you know, you've managed to get your Christmas shopping done or whatever, I think reducing that burnout so that you don't end up going off sick, you know, it's you know, self-care is sort of one of those buzzwords at the moment, isn't it? But it, you know, it's true just to have sometimes a day where, okay, you don't actually have to do anything, but it's just nice to have a day so you're not feeling that Christmas and that festive rush and pressure. So just managing that yourself in a more pragmatic way. The next question was, what was the most dramatic or unexpected piece of you know, ER work that's ever landed on your desk, just, you know, as you're closing your laptop on Christmas Eve? Has there any been sort of memorable, or has it just always been a bit of a snowball effect over December?
I think we've had a couple that have come back as a result of the Christmas party that's been held just before that. So dealing with that right on Christmas, just as everybody's sort of stopping, that's always a bit challenging. I think the other thing is that we all have a list. And we all have objectives, and most of those objectives are, by the end of the year, I will have done X, Y, and Z. And all of a sudden, something's been going on for, you know, it's been on that list for months. But all of a sudden, it's like, oh, crikey, you know, we're just about to start Christmas. I haven't done the new discretionary maternity leave policy, was one that came in 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And I was doing the cover. My colleagues were off on, had already started their Christmas break. And I did go back and say, I'm happy to do this for you now. but are you actually going to implement it this side of Christmas?
Yeah, with
And
2 days to go.
it were 2 days to go. And it was like, well, no. And I said, well, do you mind if it then waits until, January? Or in
Yeah.
actual fact, I think it was between Christmas and January, we were back at work. So do you mind if it waits until then? And it was like, no, that's absolutely fine. I just needed to get it off my list and onto your list. That's not a problem at all. So it's quite interesting measuring our objectives, thinking about our objectives and planning when we're going to do them, so that we don't end up working that, like absolutely mad scramble right in the Christmas week. It's very hard to avoid, I know, but it is worth giving some thought perhaps now to thinking about what really do I need to get done by the end of the year? How am I going to schedule that in and manage that?
Yeah, it's a really fine balance, isn't it? Because you'll either get people, like you said, kind of shifting things off of their list because that's their way of, clocking off for the break, or you do see other people potentially going the other way and they kind of defer things into January and they think, oh, that's a 2026 job, and then that actually then also leaves January not looking particularly pleasant because you've literally just kind of kicked things down the road. So I think it's like you said about making an essential list of, okay, what's critical now and then what can wait, so you're not too extreme on either case, really.
And you don't come back to an absolute stack of stuff to do on the 2nd of January or the 3rd of January.
It's not a great feeling, is it? No.
Yeah.
I guess my final question is just in your experience. So what's the most sort of common reason, why people are handing in their notice in January? Obviously you see that trend, don't you? And I'm sure there's loads of posts about it, but what do you think is leads people into having a change of heart over that Christmas period to resign in January?
I think over Christmas most of us at some point tried to have a break, and there are businesses and sectors that don't, but for the most part, at some point around that time of year, we're all doing a bit of a review of the previous year, and we're looking forward to what's going to happen in the next year going forward. Am I going to still be doing the same thing in the same place in 12 months' time? And I think it is a time when we set new objectives. We all have our New Year's resolutions, and that applies to work as well as, going to the gym, losing weight, walking more, all the other things that we think about doing. So my advice on that one is, in that last quarter of the year, so in October, November, December, be thinking about having one-to-ones with your team. Talk to them about career development. Talk about what they want from the next year going forward. Are they looking for new challenges, new projects, career progression, to be able to earn more money? Are they actually looking to make a change to reduce the amount
maybe
of
to
work
slow
that
down
they
or
do?
something.
There's some people think, actually, next year I don't want to be doing the same number of hours that I'm doing now. I want to do less hours. So have those conversations pre-Christmas, so that people, when they're thinking about it over Christmas, can plan that, but also come back with something exciting to look forward to. And there are always going to be people who actually, I'm really happy. I love my job. And yes, to some extent, it will be more of the same. Maybe a bit of redecorating, so actually broadening the role. And that's absolutely fine. Not everybody has to be on an upward trajectory. And actually, as a business, you certainly don't want that, because you'll never be able to fulfill that for everybody. But understanding what individuals want, and then talking about that before you get to that New Year crunch point, so that they don't then spend a lot of their Christmas break actually on the internet, on Indeed or wherever, looking to see what other possibilities there are, because they know that whatever their personal ideas and objectives are, then then you're going to work towards that in the new year.
And I think you're right around that people spend a lot of time over that period. And I think one thing that's actually just sprung to mind is, you after Christmas and everything, we all know January is quite tricky from a payslip perspective. It's a long month normally, and everyone's kind of splurged the cash. So from a a financial element, you know, that probably is also a quite a triggering point where people sometimes think this is going to be a really long month, you know, and then you get these conversations with partners and wider family to say, oh, you should be, you know, thinking about this and this. So have those conversations, I guess, as a business owner, so you've got peace of mind that you've ticked those things off, so that people don't kind of go away worrying about, you know, money and all the rest of it as well, if you've got something in the pipeline. I mean, I think we've squeezed a lot into 20 minutes, to be honest.
I think the only other thing is just around its inclusivity. I think
Yeah,
that's one thing we haven't sort of covered off. I think it is worth nowadays in particular, you know, things have changed in 20 or 30 years. I mean, I can remember 25 years ago, Christmas party, the boss decided she wanted to limit how drunk people could get. So she said it was only going to be soft drinks and drafts, and there was an allocation of wine, if I remember rightly. So everybody took their own spirits in their handbags or whatever. So everybody ended up extremely drunk anyway. But also the consideration of the fact, and I think, you know, to be honest, there are a lot of younger people who now don't drink or drink very little, certainly a lot less than perhaps, you know, my own generation might have drunk in terms of, you know, of getting drunk. But there's such a fantastic range of alcohol-free or very low alcohol spirits, drafts, cider, wine. And actually, we had the expo recently, and we had some excellent and non-alcoholic wines at that. So it is worth thinking about actually making sure that you include those as well, so that you're fulfilling for a wider range of people.
Yeah, I also, yeah, like you said, the inclusion piece is interesting. I think as part of this, the guide, we've also got our previous webinar on how to make, you know, your festive period is inclusive. But one thing that always stuck out in my mind as well is, you know, you'd quite often see Christmas parties being booked right over maybe children's bedtimes or something, and you'd kind of get the stereotypical male side of the workforce in the pub early having drinks, because, you know, typically, you know, the female side is sorting out the kids before they can get to the pub or whatever. So it's thinking just about timings and making sure that, you know, everyone's got accessibility, I guess, to all sorts of different activities. So yeah, it's always a tricky one to navigate, isn't it? But well, look, thanks for everybody who's able to join us on our little sort of mini webinar and episode of festive HR storytelling. December will always bring up surprises. I'm sure we're in for another roller coaster this year. So we look forward to that. But also, yeah, hopefully, you know, it just allows you to reflect on some of the points that we've talked about and remind you that people do really matter. And, you know, if you can take one small thing away from this, then and implement it, then hopefully that will make an impact to your business. But yeah, if we don't speak to you, then have a wonderful and steady festive season ahead. Thank you very much.
Enjoy.